Hey, once again, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thanks again for joining us. Welcome to B&B Hockey Talk. I'm Aaron Bloxel with my co-host, Matthew Balzer. Hit the like button, share this with your friends as we are previewing the Edmonton Oilers today. Two words for all you fans out there, Taylor Hall and Jordan Eberle. We're gonna touch on them in a few minutes, but first, Matthew's gonna go through today's signings, and then we're going to get right into the Edmonton Oilers and projected lines for them. Matthew, take it away.
All right. So first off the bat, the Washington Capitals brought back Brooks Orpik after trading him away, and then he got bought out by Colorado. They brought him back on a 1-year, $1 million deal, which is an excellent deal for them. Coming off that Orpik cap hit before he was bought out was $5.5 million. So that freed up $4.5 million for them. The St. Louis Blues re-signed defenseman Joel Edmondson to a 1-year, $3 million deal. He's set on that second pairing with Colton Parayko, and is that good stay-at-home defenseman for them. The Anaheim Ducks re-signed Brandon Montour to a 2-year deal worth $3.39 million. He's in that big top four for them. And if he continues to progress, could be a 40-plus point defenseman this year for them. And then the Winnipeg Jets continue to start wrapping up all their restricted free agents. They re-signed defenseman Tucker Poolman, who was their 7th-8th defenseman, to a 3-year extension, and for Marco Dano to a 1-year extension worth $800K. And both of those guys are more depth players. Poolman will be looking to get some more playing time in the NHL. And Dano, he's one of those guys I started off as a big fan of when he started off with Columbus. But that now, since he got traded to Chicago and then to Winnipeg, he hasn't really found his footing in the NHL. But he'll be a depth forward for them.
I think Montour, the Anaheim Ducks, got a lot of good value in his contract, considering what his ceiling is. But enough of that. Let's talk about what a lot of people I know are big fans of, and a lot of people I know who are big fans of the Canucks absolutely hate. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. Let's start off with their forwards, and let's touch on some potential line combinations we're going to see.
All right, so talk about the mess of salary cap issues for the Edmonton Oilers. My top line, they ended off the season with this line that actually turned into a pretty decent line. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, and Ty Rattie I have as their top line. Nugent-Hopkins, they moved him from the middle to the wing with McDavid, and those two, including in the World Championships over in Europe after, really showed that they had really good chemistry, and Nugent-Hopkins started to shoot the puck more with McDavid, which is big for the Oilers, getting a big scoring winger. Ty Rattie's an interesting player. He was a late first-rounder with St. Louis many years ago, and he'd been one of those guys that had been able to produce in the AHL but hadn't really gotten a shot at the NHL. But he finally started to get some chemistry with McDavid. But playing with McDavid, if you get in the right spot, you should get points. So right now, that's a good spot for him there. And that just shows the lack of depth at wing that the Oilers have, though. The second line, the best contract in the NHL, Milan Lucic, Leon Draisaitl, and Jesse Puljujarvi. Lucic with that big $6 million cap hit for the next 5 years had a terrible season. He only had 10 goals and 34 points for the entire year. He was a guy that they brought in to play with McDavid to help protect him and put the puck in the net. And, man, I think lots of people saw when the Oilers handed him out that long-term contract, just thinking, what are the Oilers doing, handing out a power forward that's about close to 30 years old, that amount of money. That looks like the Louis Eriksson contract with the Canucks. We'll see there. And Draisaitl had an up-and-down year. but playing consistently at center, and he can move up to play with McDavid if there are issues. And with Puljujarvi, he's another guy that I'll be interested to see how he will do this year, because he was another guy that had inconsistencies throughout the year, but it will be interesting to see how he does. The third line I have is Tobias Rieder, Ryan Strome, and Pontus Åberg. Rieder they brought in from Los Angeles with free agency. Ryan Strome, who in the Jordan Eberle trade, who they brought in, there were really high hopes that he could play with McDavid at the beginning of the season, but he didn't really get much going this past year. I think he also only had 34 points as well, and has turned into more of a depth centerman than with the Islanders, where it looked like he was going to be a good top two center. And the fourth line, I was Drake Kajulia, Kyle Brodziak, and Zach Kassian. Brodziak, I think, is a good depth center signing, and they got him at a really good deal. I think just over $1 million for each year. And Zach Kassian, as we know, being with the Canucks, I've really enjoyed how he's gotten his career back on track with the Oilers, seeing like some of the success that he had with Vancouver before he had his personal problems and everything, to get back to the player that some people saw that he should be. And then as extra forwards, I have a Surrey native, Juhar Kiara, who should be rotating in like that bottom six with a couple of those other forwards that I mentioned. He actually had a pretty good rookie year. He had 11 goals and 21 points in only 68 games, and should be pushing for more time. And a guy like Pontus Åberg, who I brought up earlier, him and Kiara can be interchangeable.
Absolutely. They have, McDavid's going to get his points. They've got a lot of firepower. Hopefully they can find that firepower from a couple of seasons ago when they made a small playoff run. The Tobias Rieder signing adds a lot of speed to the wing, which I think they desperately needed. And they've actually got a couple of prospects, too, that I think are going to push to make this team, which we'll touch on. So on defense, we have Darnell Nurse, Jacob Larsson, Andrei Sekera, Chris Russell, Oscar Klefbom, and Jim Benning's nephew, Matt Benning. Those six are pretty solid. They definitely took a step back last year, but I think they really missed Sekera to start the season off with that long injury that he had to start the season. And it'll bring a little bit of consistency to that team. We have a rookie in Ethan Bear, who we'll touch on as the number 7 guy, and I think he's going to push and maybe even play full-time this year. And then a depth defenseman in Kevin Gravel.
Yeah. With that, the Oilers still need to re-sign Darnell Nurse, and they have just under $5 million left in cap space. So with Larson and Klefbom and Russell all basically making around $4 million or just above that, I look for that price. Adam Larson, well, him and that Taylor Hall deal, it just looks worse and worse and worse the more you look at it. Chris Russell, I think he's one of the more, I think, underrated defensemen. He blocks a ton of shots. With me being a goalie, I really appreciate guys getting in the way of the puck as much as he does. I'm so excited about the Oilers. I called Adam Larson Jacob Larson. Yeah. But yeah, Klefbom will be the big guy that they want a big bounce back season from. He showed the season before that he was going to be a 10+ goal, 40-point defenseman, type of defenseman, and be one of those top 2 pairing type of guys on the back end. But he was another guy that really regressed with some injuries as well. But yeah, there's a lot of potential for some of these defensemen, but it'll be up to them to take that step forward. Well, let's get into their goaltending. Why don't you lead us into that, since you can still stack the pads? All right, so it'll be an interesting year in that, or some interesting decisions that Peter Chiarelli made. Well, they still have Cam Talbot as their number one, but their big signing that they brought in was Mikko Koskinen, who's played in the KHL for the past few years. He was a former Islanders second-round pick, basically a first-rounder. He was 31st overall. I forget in what year, but it was a few years ago. But they brought him in at a one-year deal at $2.5 million for a guy that's played only a couple NHL games in his career, which is crazy to think. His numbers were good in the KHL last year. He had a 22-4-1 record with a 937 save percentage. But the thing is with that, he was playing for like one of the best teams in the KHL, so it's sort of hard to see what expectations there will be for him this year. But he should be pushing Talbot if he does have some struggles again for starts. And then their third stringer, Al Montoya, should be buried in the minors this year. And that's another over $1 million for a third stringer. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to dump him off somewhere, or they'll just have to live with him in the minors this year.
Well, their struggle for a number one goaltender, I think, has been well documented over the last few years. Not last year, but the year before. Cam Talbot really stepped up, looked like a number one goalie, but he definitely took a step backwards last year. I'm going to be interested to see if he can regain that form. If not, the Edmonton Oilers they might be in trouble, because that goaltending really does make a big difference for that team, especially the way they play.
Yeah, and then I think another thing with Talbot is getting a consistent backup goalie that can get him nights off, because between Laurent Brossoit and Al Montoya, they really didn't do much. It's like they try to get him a night off, and then they let in a bunch of goals, and then they'd have to make a goalie change when they wanted to get Talbot some rest. So with him being one of the busiest goalies in the NHL last year, it's important to get him back down to the 60-game mark and get a good 20-plus starts from Koskinen.
A few interesting UFAs that they have not re-signed. Mike Camilleri, and, of course, defenseman Mark Fane, and Abbotsford's very own Grayson Downing. Now, I don't know if any of these players are going to get a contract. I can see Grayson Downing getting an AHL contract potentially for the next season, or going to Europe. But I think Mike Camilleri might be at the end of the line. Where do you see them signing on anywhere?
Yeah, Camilleri, he's one of those guys where it's like if he gets hot, he gets hot, but when he's cold now, he is super cold. I think I did see a report that maybe he could be heading to Russia with Coach Bob Hartley, who coaches a team there, that he might be trying to sway Camilleri to play there next year. But I still think on a good team or something, he could bring some depth, but he is coming towards the end of his career.
Yeah. Well, let's touch on some of their prospects. They got a lot of potential guys that might crack this lineup or push for a spot. And we might even see some of them throughout the year as call-ups from the Bakersfield Condors. Let's first talk about Kyler Yamamoto. He played 9 games last year, looked great. I thought they were going to keep him for the entire season, and I thought it was a great draft pick for them, but they decided to put him back down in junior. I can really see him pushing to crack the starting lineup this year. Ethan Bear ended the season really strong on defense, playing in 18 games and not looking out of place at all. In fact, I thought at times he was their best defenseman down the stretch. And I'll get you to go through those two players' stats in a few minutes. So Vancouver Giants' very own Tyler Benson, 2016 second-round draft pick, putting up 69 points last year with the G-Men in 58 games, and then signing on with Bakersfield and finishing the season with them. He had 3 points in 5 games. He's definitely an offensive player. I don't see him cracking the Oilers this year, but definitely going to be one of the first call-ups, because he's going to make his pro rookie season with the Condors this year. And if they struggle up front at all with the Oilers, I can see him being called up fairly quickly. But look for him to see what his training camp looks like and how that's going to affect his chances of staying with the team. Now, of course, this year they got one of the players I really wanted the Canucks to draft, but the way the draft went, it was completely off the charts and weird. The Edmonton Oilers ended up with big defenseman Evan Bouchard, the first overall. London Knight player, finished with 87 points in only 67 games. And, of course, they got swept in the first round of the playoffs. He only played in 4 games, but had 5 points in doing so. Just an absolute beast back there. Potential power play quarterback in the future for the Oilers. But I see him probably going back to juniors this year and then really pushing for a spot next year. Ryan McLeod, another player they picked up in this year's draft, second round from the Mississauga Steelheads, played in 68 games, getting 70 points, and he was just over almost a point a game in the playoffs with Mississauga. That's potential guy, probably 2 or 3 years down the road. And a couple guys that are a little bit closer, and I know you've got a few guys you want to touch on as well, is center Cooper Merity, who they signed out of the Philadelphia Flyers organization. He was a late pick in 2015 in the 6th round. He's listed as one of their top players out of the Bakersfield Condors this year, and potentially going to see some time with the Edmonton Oilers. And we also have defenseman Caleb Jones, who was a 4th-round pick in 2015, who's developed nicely. And they've said that he's fairly close as well to potentially playing a few games with the big club this year. So why don't you take us through who else you got? Take us through Yamamoto and Ethan Bear's numbers, and let's touch on some more prospects.
All right. So a couple other guys I'll throw out there. Their big goalie prospect is Stuart Skinner, who split the season between Lethbridge and Swift Current. He took Swift Current to the Western Hockey League Championship and to the Memorial Cup. He had a 30-21-1 record for the entire year, but his numbers with Swift Current, he went 16-6-1 in the season with a .914 save percentage and 6 shutouts for the entire season. And then in the playoffs, he took his game to another level, and he went 16-10, but he had a .932 save percentage and another 6 shutouts in the playoffs. And I know in the Memorial Cup, Swift Current didn't do that well, but he stood on his head for Swift Current to get them to that Memorial Cup, which they did play a whole lot more games than most of the other teams that made it to the Memorial Cup. But yeah, he's their big goalie prospect, and I believe he'll be in the American League this coming year. Another defenseman who played with Elias Pettersson over in Sweden this past year, Joel Persson, or Persson, depending on the pronunciation. He had 34 points, 6 goals in 51 games, and another 5 points in 13 playoff games. This guy fed Pettersson on that power play and could be a potential guy to make their back end to help produce some offense, along with Ethan Bear potentially to push the first spot there. Yeah, with Yamamoto, I could see him getting into a third-line spot over Auberg. His numbers were really good. He had 21 goals, 64 points in only 40 games in Spokane this past year. And then he also played for the U.S. at the World Juniors. Tyler Benson, I think a lot of BC people will be keeping an eye on him, with him playing for the Vancouver Giants. And it will be interesting to see if he does get some games in with the lack of depth on the wings that the Oilers have, and with him being a bigger body, being more physically ready than most other prospects, if he will get into some games this coming season. Yeah, and then Ethan Bear, he had 6 goals, 18 points in only 37 games in the American League. But in junior, this guy was like a point-a-game type of defenseman and could potentially break out as a power play quarterback if guys like Clefbaum and Sekera can't step up to carry the back end as a power play quarterback. But yeah, that's basically it. But yeah, and then Koskinen, who they did, as I mentioned earlier, is the big goalie who they'll be looking to see if they can get some starts with him and Talbot both being unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. If those two guys can't get it done, they'll have a lot of money to spend to try to get a number one goalie in their lineup.
Now, interesting enough, they finished with only 78 points last year after making it to the playoffs the year before. And one of the stats that stood out to both of us was the worst power play in the NHL with all that firepower. Now, for me, 78 points, I see them improving to about 90 points this year, but still on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs. What do you see from them, and where do you see them finishing?
I still see them really struggling this year. Just being a Canucks fan, it's always good to see the Oilers suck. Even now with the Sedin's gone, it'll be sort of the other way when the Canucks play the Oilers for the next little while. But with years and years of seeing the Sedins just dominate the Oilers, it was eventually time to happen once when McDavid got there. But yeah, I have them finishing third last in the West. Only Chicago and Vancouver, I think, will have worse seasons being a Canucks fan. That is tough. But I think they'll be clumped in sort of with like Calgary and Arizona and Anaheim, sort of in those teams that could be like in that 80 to 90 point range, somewhere in there. But it is a big question mark to see which way this team goes this year, because McDavid can carry a team a whole lot, but he needs some help. He can't do it all by himself, even as great of a player as he is.
Yeah, Art Ross Trophy winner, and just really struggled to find players that were going to step up with him to help carry the Edmonton Oilers. So, well, that concludes our Edmonton Oilers preview, and our 31 teams in 31 days will continue tomorrow night. And, continue to smash that like button for us. Share our program. Comment below what you think the Oilers, where you think they're going to finish, what they should do, who, even comment on some of the rookies that you think might be on the starting lineup for this team when opening day of the season starts. So once again, I'm Aaron Bloxel with Matthew Balzer. This has been B&B Hockey Talk. Thanks so much for tuning us in, and we'll see you all tomorrow evening.